Hi, I'm a former higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. At a certain point in my career, my soft skills became significantly more important than what I would call my quote unquote hard skills. So, things like my ability to write, things like my ability to design, all of the things that made me successful in the first half of my career are not the things that made me successful in the second half. The second half of my career, all of those soft skills, the emotional intelligence, all of that became super critical to my success. The challenge that we have is that these things are not always things that we teach people or mentor people in. And it's something that when we look at performance planning, we're typically looking for those really concrete things that someone accomplishes. And we're not thinking about the things that allow them to become their most emotionally intelligent selves. That's why I was super excited to bring in Kelly Hiller, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Purdue University. She has embedded developing those soft skills into the performance planning at her institution. So I'm super excited to have this conversation with her. Kelly is currently the Chief Marketing Officer, where she has the honor of leading a dynamic team of professionals dedicated to elevating the Purdue brand. Known for her ability to remain strong yet flexible amid the winds of chaotic change, not that we're in that right now, she finds daily inspiration in the words, "Nevertheless, she persisted," which she had tattooed on her wrist as a reminder to take a deep breath and focus on finding solutions in tough situations. I hope you enjoy this episode. You're listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast where marketing minds in higher ed come to pull back the curtain, spill a little tea, and talk honestly about what it takes to market in this industry. I'm Jaime Hunt, the founder of Solve Higher Ed, author of Heart Over Hype, and a former campus CMO who spent more than 2 decades navigating the weird, wonderful world of higher education marketing. This show is for the strategists, the storytellers, the change agents, and anyone who has ever tried to get Faculty Senate on board with a rebrand. Here we get candid about the challenges and share the ideas that are shaping the future of our field. Sound like your kind of conversation? Then let's get into it. Hey, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am super excited about this conversation. Before I hit record, I was talking to Kelly about the efforts that they're making in the Purdue Brand Studio to have real performance metrics and performance development around soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to just start off with, why did you decide to do that? What made you tackle this as something you wanted to have in your performance management planning?
Sure. I think there were two kind of primary forces that really kind of flagged this as a priority for myself and for the leadership team. Like I said, two things at play. One, we are seeing a larger than ever project volume, a lot more work coming through, a lot more forced kind of conversations on prioritization, because if everything is a priority, nothing is. And so coming to the table with those conversations, but also at the same time, our team is growing. This year, we were asked to take in a couple of other departments into our area, which is fantastic. Additional talent, additional ways we can tell the Purdue story. So we brought in our team with the Office of Research, Student Life, and Teaching and Learning. And one thing that has always been extremely important to me, and I feel like has always been our superpower, is our team culture. We're very intentional about that. And as you bring in new people, it's also having the conversation of, well, how do we protect our culture? How do we welcome others into our culture? And a lot of times like that does root itself in soft skills. It's, how are you interacting with people you maybe haven't worked with before? You don't know their style. How do you do that in a collaborative way? Needing additional people to do presentations. Do they feel comfortable in that space? Having uncomfortable conversations, how we really pride ourselves on kind candor, but that's not always natural for everybody. And when you're working in an environment that is very busy, it has a lot of demands. How do you cope with that? How do you handle that stress? How do you receive, but also give constructive feedback? How do you listen to understand, seek to understand versus just respond? All of those things I think go into a really, a high performing culture, high performing in not only the work, but in that kind of emotional intelligence and those soft skills space, and giving an opportunity for everybody to contribute, as well as also having some conversations about self-reflection, and you can be very, very skilled at your job, but what are those other areas that are causing roadblocks from you doing your best work? And a lot of times it isn't a skill deficiency that you have another person or with a team or whatever the case may be. It's often rooted in soft skills, that there's a gap taking some place somewhere, that is causing some friction. So we just wanted to really kind of get ahead of that and also create a safe space for everybody to talk about those things. I mean, maybe it's something that's been bothering you for a while, or a skill you wanted to do, but it really didn't fit in anywhere. And really just tried to open that door for people to kind of walk through and have those conversations with their managers that we really felt like overall would land everybody in a better place of just having those conversations, acknowledging the weaknesses, and also making time, and dedicating resources to improve those skills that people were looking to enhance.
I think this is a brilliant idea. And when we first talked about this, I didn't know that this was led by this idea of bringing folks into the culture and sort of setting that expectation for behaviors and competencies that they would need to grow and develop. And I just think that's absolutely brilliant. I've been through multiple mergers of departments, multiple centralizations, that kind of thing. And that is definitely one of the biggest challenges, is having that, preserving the culture if
Mhm.
it's good, assuming you have a good
Sure.
culture, preserving that culture, and then also bringing folks into that, making them feel supported in that, and
Exactly.
that they have the resources that they need to be part of that culture in a healthy way. Which really brings me to, how do you actually operationalize making soft skills a competency?
Sure. So it's a part of our performance management system. We kind of set out a framework across our department each year. We align on overall goals department wide that everybody ladders up to. And so, depending on an individual's level, for example, if you're more of a junior level employee, I would rather just set one goal for you that you knock out of the park versus overwhelming you with a lot of different goals that maybe you're not going to be able to dig in deep in. So, based on the level, we require a certain number of goals, anywhere ranging from 1 to 3. And then on top of that, we also have what we call a development goal. And that is where you are going out and you are seeking a new skill, that will enhance your performance. So, maybe that it's something associated with AI, maybe it's a software platform. It could be a variety of different things. But then, as a part of our overall performance management system, there also is a section called professional development. And I wanted to differentiate that from the development goal, since I felt we would be asking different things. And that's where really the soft skill area comes in. So we're asking folks to sit down, have a conversation with their supervisor. What is something, and I think the conversation, I expect, goes two ways. It could be something that the employee has identified about themselves, a soft skill that they're looking. Like I said, maybe that's in collaboration, maybe it's in presentations, maybe it's being able to have kind and candid feedback with your teammates, but also giving the opportunity to the supervisor to see, like, hey, I see this opportunity for growth in you, or I would really love for you to speak more often at our all staff meetings, but I saw in the last one you seemed really uncomfortable. How can we put some, training and tools in place for you to feel more confident, so that when you go out and make your presentations, you're exuding that confidence because you have the skills, the subject matter. So let's build on that. And outlining that, and then outlining, what does a plan look like in order to enhance and improve in that soft skill area. And then I think it's in March, our employees, everybody, all team members, as a matter of fact, go through and do a self-evaluation and kind of rate themselves of how they did in those areas. And then the manager does as well. And again, conversations take place on, is this an area, particularly your soft skill, you really knocked it out of the park. We saw great improvement. It was really a win for you. Or maybe there's still some more work to do, just depending on the situation and what that person is looking to improve. I would say there's definitely degrees of difficulty depending on the person and what they're looking to achieve. So making it a part of our overall scoring of the overall rubric to really hit the point home. It's not just about, hitting your goals of what you achieved in your job, but it's also growing you as an employee, growing your marketability, and growing you in your career too. Because as you progress, those soft skills become more and more important.
This is just so smart. And I have one of my mentees has a leader who's a VP who really needed this sort of soft skill development. And so when you mentioned it as being something that can help grow people in their career, position them for, continued growth in that area, I mean, that seems really, really smart. I'd love to hear how your team embraced this. Like, what was the reaction when you first started having this conversation about doing this?
I would say the reaction probably crossed a span. So one thing that did prompt it is in July, we had our first brand camp, where it was the first time in, 5 years that we'd brought all the marketing and communications professionals from across campus, essentially to do an internal conference. So we had a lot of presentations. We brought in a couple of outside people. We had some of our colleges, really just looking for subject matter experts in some different areas that we were getting frequent questions about. And a lot of our team members were really excited about the opportunity, but did struggle with feeling comfortable and representing themselves as a subject matter expert in their presentation skills. So that really was, I would say, kind of what motivated, and then also the integrations. And then as far as the team members, I think it has been really well received in that, we are willing to put resources behind and helping you and giving you space to help. And sometimes it's not about a professional development necessarily opportunity. So maybe it's not a workshop. Maybe it's recommending a book. Maybe it's partnering somebody up with a mentor who's really good at, I'll use having kind, candid conversations. A lot of times if there is feedback or conflict within our cross-functional teams, we really like for, just it's kind of that golden rule of like, you want to be treated as, you ask people to treat you, that back and forth. And so going to that other person and say, hey, you provided this feedback in the meeting, but it really wasn't helpful to me in the way you framed that. Here's what I'm looking for, but not everybody's comfortable having those conversations, right? So partnering them with a mentor who's really good at that. And so I think overall, once we kind of got over the hump of like, oh, this is different, this is something new, always there's that reaction of just a little bit of kind of surprise and curiosity of why we're focusing on this. But we are a very transparent culture. So, like I addressed the full team and was very transparent about here's what I'm observing, here's the motivations behind this. And I do feel like, this is an opportunity to make some space to have these conversations. And so I feel like it's been really well received. And I've really enjoyed kind of seeing the breadth of what different people are looking to tackle or improve about themselves that I think will ultimately make everybody better team members.
I love it. And I also think that you're probably going to have better marketing as a result. I mean, and that's why in my book, the first 2/3 is how to market with empathy. But the last third is like, you need to lead with empathy before you can market with empathy. You have to have a team that works together in a way where they're seeing each other's perspectives and understanding each other and then understanding their audience. And so I imagine that you could see some of these soft skills translating into better marketing. And I'm curious if you've seen any of that yet.
I definitely think we'll get there more and more as the year goes on. We've always talked about emotive storytelling and bringing emotion into our work. We often use the phrase when we're working on a project, taking a step back and saying, why should people care? In that copy, why should someone care? In that video, why should someone care? Could someone else, another university, slap their logo at the end of that? and it completely makes sense. So, I mean, marketing is fundamentally about human connection, as you well know and have talked about. And a lot of that is understanding emotional intelligence. It's like data is very important. It plays a really important part in marketing decisions as well as demographics. But then you also need to understand, how is someone feeling? What are prospective students anxious about? What does a parent really see as value when it comes to making this investment of higher education? And when you start to dig into those emotional truths, and as we're digging into those truths in our team, I mean, all of that is found, fundamentally part of good marketing, making sure that, when marketing, you're not just doing something clever, but you're doing something that genuinely resonates with real human emotion and making sure what you're doing is authentic. So I definitely see those human connection elements consistent with developing soft skills on our team, as well as elevating the marketing that we're putting out into the world.
I often talk about how innovation has to have empathy embedded in it, because otherwise you're just chasing shiny objects versus developing something that actually serves a need,
Right.
or addresses a pain point, or has resonance for the audience. And so I'm so in love with the fact that you've made this be just not just part of the culture, but part of the expectation, because you're not just saying, hey, this is who we are and you need to be like this. You're saying you actually have to do some investment of time and some self-reflection to be a better human, really, at the end of the
Sure.
day. I love that. Have you noticed that strengthening these interpersonal skills has unlocked any creativity, or helped some relationships, or helped bridge some silos across areas, maybe not even within your department, but with other departments like admissions or advancement?
Sure. I definitely think it is bringing better conversations, particularly like to concepting and brainstorming. It's about, what are we looking to solve here? We can think about, what do we want to say about Purdue, but it's like, what does our audience need to hear and what are they feeling right now? I think those conversations are increasingly important when it comes to your prospective student journey and their marketing. And we've done several projects, big projects and overhauls based on that. Lately with admissions, we've totally changed, redesigned the admissions website and kind of the customer journey of how does someone come in through our front door, and what does that look and feel like, and how are we addressing the things that they are anxious about, they have questions about. Are we organizing information in a very clear way for students as well as their parents, and brought that same perspective to overhauling our view book and other print materials that we put forth, particularly in the lens of parents. I'm sure you're seeing, and we're seeing as well, as parents are playing a huge part in the decision-making process. And, previous to these very intentional efforts, there was information, there's a page in the back for parents with like
Yeah.
key deadlines, but really digging in deeper of the questions they have about return on investment, about placement rates, about really breaking down fees and being as transparent as possible to eliminate as many questions, as many anxieties as possible, because this is a huge investment. And so I think kind of taking the approach of asking questions, as in digging into the drivers, digging into what people are feeling on our own team as a part of those brainstorming sessions. And sometimes that's asking really uncomfortable questions. And I think it's also great, like we're just at this interesting point right now where we have a lot of team members who actually have kids going through the college experience, not just at Purdue, but as other universities as well. And so that has, I feel, brought a whole new perspective and kind of challenging, well, I went through the tour at this university and this is how it presented. And I think they did a lot better job, and kind of embracing that feedback and the willingness to take it to our partners. And luckily, those in enrollment management, we have a great relationship with, very, very strong partners who, just like us, are always looking to do it better, always, recognizing there's ways we can improve, and recognizing that the landscape is constantly evolving. So you have to keep up with it. Doing things the way you've always done will not yield you the long-term results you're looking to drive.
Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 30 to 35% email open rates. The impact was personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents. No, I couldn't agree more with that. I'm really intrigued by this whole process of people growing and developing. And I'm really curious about what does that look like in practice? Like what kind of activities or experiences count toward accomplishing those things? And then how are you sort of tracking and measuring? Soft skills are notoriously difficult to evaluate. So how are you making sure that this isn't just like, I check a box, I went to a webinar and I actually sat and played on my phone during the whole thing, but now I can say I attended it. Like, how are you evaluating all of this?
Sure. What we've asked all of our team members to do in meeting with their supervisors and outlining what soft skill are they looking to focus on. And I will point out, we are keeping it singular. Like, what is the one thing that you are going to focus on in this performance management cycle that you're looking to grow and enhance? And so depending on what that is, it's discussed in our one-on-ones. We also have a very intentional kind of mid-year check on performance management because I recognize that sometimes landscape changes more so in the goals aspect. We like to do a refresh of because I always want to be setting our team members up for success. So if there is something that's shifted or a priority is shifted, it gives people the opportunity to go in and make adjustments. But on the soft skill part, it's, how are you tracking? What have you completed? How are you knowing you've achieved this? So maybe that's, talking with your teammates. Have you seen any change in me in this particular area? Is my feedback more clear? Am I being, participating more in meetings and bringing more thoughtful questions? Like whatever the case may be. But then when it comes to that self-evaluation, providing outcomes, like what did you complete? What was the feedback you received? So it is somewhat tailored, which does take a little bit more time, but ultimately I think it is time more spent. So I agree with you. We've always operated in the fact that, and that's why we've put constraints around our goals and not just, I am not interested in somebody having 5 to 10 goals. That is not productive. They're not going to dig in deep. They're not going to move a needle significantly in whatever they're looking to move. So we keep it really narrow and focused so that it's impactful, but yet manageable at the same time, knowing all of the other things that people have on their plates.
One of the big challenges, I think, is having people come back to those goals sooner than 1 month before the end of the performance plan. Are there things that you're doing that you keep it sort of top of mind throughout the year so that folks don't get into that, which I've seen a million times, and there's a lot of people are super busy, stretched thin. But, if you wait if it's due in March and you wait until February, it's not as effective, I think, as if you were keeping this top of mind throughout the year.
And I think there's an accountability on leadership right there, quite honestly, and that it's something we talk about in our leadership meetings. We touch base on, we reinforce the expectation that these things should be discussed in everybody's one-on-one meetings. And I'm very vocal to our full team that nothing in your performance evaluation should ever be a surprise. If it is a surprise, then we have another thing that we need to discuss. And that's when, others will get involved and we'll talk through it. Because I agree with you. It can't, if it's going to be a meaningful exercise, it can't be a box that you check, something that you submit, a file that you upload, and then you forget about it until March. Ultimately, that's not going to serve that individual's growth, and it's not also going to serve just the improvement and the enhancement of the organization that ultimately is the goal of this to drive.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. What's your vision? Like, where do you see this going in 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think one big vision I have is, preparing people for growth. As people move on or retire and having honest conversations too. And we talk about this with individuals. Are you looking to grow in your role? Are you looking to advance? At this stage or right now, are you really comfortable in your role? Because we hired you to do a job. So if you are doing your job at a high level and you're very content at that, that is great. But if you are looking to advance, nothing is going to frustrate that person more than if you're not feeding that. If you're not talking about what does it take to get to the next level. And I think soft skills often come into a big part of that conversation, particularly if you're looking to grow as a leader that supervises people. You have to have empathy. You have to conduct yourself in a certain way. There's a level of professionalism that you need to develop. And those leadership skills, all of those need nourished. So I think it's working through, if you want to continue on a certain trajectory year after year, you have to be thinking about succession. You have to be thinking about what are our gaps, who are those individuals that might be looking at retirement soon. Or you also have the real reality sometimes is that you have high performing individuals and there's not a path for them. How are you being their champion and preparing them to go elsewhere and be successful and thrive, yet knowing that you have a pipeline in place that when they leave and when they move on, the momentum that you've established, will continue. So I think there's a couple different areas, but the things that stand up to mind is, continuing the trajectory, succession planning, and preparing people for that next step in their career.
It feels like people are really lucky to work in your organization.
Well, thank you.
You're
That's
really,
so kind.
First of all, you guys are doing amazing things. Like that's Purdue's marketing team is among the best of the best. But then you also have this extra layer here that's really helping people grow and develop. And I would encourage the people who are listening who are maybe not in a position to implement something like this to make a goal for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe ask your colleagues, your peers, people within your org, outside your org, what soft skill, where do you feel like I need to develop? Do not be defensive, let people be really candid with you. Like, hey, you know what? When you present, you ramble on too long or fill in the blank. And then develop your own personal plan for growing these soft skills, because Kelly is absolutely right. As you grow in leadership, these become more important, I think, than hard skills. Part of the reason why I went into consulting is because I wanted to keep doing things, but in leadership roles, a lot of the work is managing people and building relationships with people across your institution and across, within your organization, navigating tricky conversations, all of that. And if you could have all the hard skills in the world. I remember somebody saying, I don't understand why this person is getting a promotion. I have better hard skills than she does. And it was like, you're not ready to lead at that level because of the soft skills. So think about that if you're listening and you are like, you know what, I do want to be a leader. I keep getting passed over. Maybe you're not in an org where they're being candid and kind about why that is. Do some self-reflection. Where can you grow and develop? I just love that you're letting this be part of the work process at Purdue.
Yeah, I think it's so important. You're exactly right. Because someone can have all the heart, all the technical savvy and all the knowledge possible. But if they can't translate that in a digestible way, then it really falls flat. If they can't work with their colleagues in a kind and collaborative way, the work is going to suffer because when you don't have those strong relationships, it can be a real challenge. And I would say, when you also develop these soft skills, I think there's an element of unlocking creativity because you take out some barriers. Egos are more checked to the side. It becomes about the work. And you're also you feel a little bit safer in being honest and saying, hey, I don't think this is working. Or I feel like, we need to make a change to this creative or we need to do some testing. And so I feel like you also unlock some possibilities because you have developed those soft skills and can approach those conversations in a kind, collaborative way that doesn't automatically put up a wall for people. So it develops you as a person, but then at the end of the day, I think the work definitely benefits.
It absolutely does. And I think if you're the kind of person that lays awake at night and thinks about what I should have said in this moment,
there's like nothing worse.
Right? Or I felt slighted by that or whatever. I found as I developed my soft skills, I laid awake less at night thinking about that because I knew I was reacting in the moment in the best way that I could have because I was sort of prepared for those types of conversations. I'm sure you've had similar as you grow professionally, the things that leave you laying awake at night change. You still lay awake at
We
night,
still
but it
do.
might not be I wish I would have said this, or this person slighted me, because you may have dealt with that in the moment a little better.
I think for certain, because I can think of many times where, I've navigated a tough situation, but I didn't lay awake at night, maybe like I had in the past, because I felt like first I was kind, and second, like I was transparent and honest. And so when I put myself in that other person's shoes, even if it was a hard conversation or a difficult decision, those are elements that I could respect. And so when you are operating out of a place of respect because you did navigate with kindness, with empathy, with transparency, with fairness, to eliminate a lot of those, right? Because at the end of the day, you feel like, okay, I did right by that individual, or I did right by the work. You do have less sleepless nights.
Well, and some of the things that you're saying points back to one of the big questions I always get when I talk about empathy and leadership. And people always assume that being an empathetic leader means there's no accountability. But I feel like everything you just said about, dealing with things with kindness, but you're still dealing with them. I'd love to hear your thoughts around, empathy and accountability coexisting.
Yes, I feel very strongly about that too. I mean, you can be an empathetic leader, but still stress accountability because you've been clear on the expectations. If you've been clear on the expectations, if you've provided the resources to meet those expectations, then there is definitely a level of accountability, and that's also part of doing good work. If you are going to consistently deliver excellent work, accountability has to be a big element in your culture. We say we go first, we take risks, we do excellent work, we do it together, and we act with kindness and care. So all of that, I feel like that mixture provides the foundations for what can be a culture of kindness, but also accountability. Because we need our team members to show up to do their part. They have people counting on them, and so like you said, the conversation can still very much be empathetic yet accountable. Of like, I see you, I value you as a teammate, but today you let your team down by not meeting this deadline or saying this comment that maybe didn't show care. There's lots of different ways that can go, but accountability is really important, because I think on the flip side, if you don't emphasize accountability, then you really can't consistently demonstrate care. Because if you're not holding your teammates accountable and expecting that your teammates hold you accountable for a certain level of conduct, for a certain level of work, then others have to pick up the slack. And that's not fair. That's not kind. So it really is a two-way street there.
I love what you just said. And I tell people all the time, clear is kind, and holding people to expectations is kind, and having people resent you because you're not pulling your weight, you're not accomplishing things, and having the leader never hold you accountable for that. That's a different kind of unkindness. It's having this resentment on the team that has built up because you're not performing to the expectation that everybody else is being held to. And so don't think about empathy and kindness as being something that means you just cut people slack. I don't see that at all as being the case.
No, I agree. And I think in an environment, and this is common, I'm sure it's common in many industries of higher education, is that when you're under pressure and you have limited resources, I firmly believe the human stuff can either make you or break you. Teams that communicate well, that they adapt well, that they support each other through various ways, through stress, get more done. There's less drama, there's less conflict, there's less skills waste that takes place. You minimize disruptions, conflicts, misunderstandings, all those types of things. And so that's why we are focusing on soft skills so much, is because we do have more pressures than ever. We are seeing limited resources. The expectations are higher. The project mix is more complex. So everybody needs to approach the work in a way that does support each other, that is adaptable, that is flexible, and kind of set that baseline for like, I am going to show up, and we all have days where we don't show up our best selves every single day, but that should be an exception. And when we don't, we should work in a team that's like, hey, I see you, I hear you. What can I do to help you out today? Make sure that the work gets done, but that's showing care. So it can take a lot of different forms. But I truly believe, like, even in the most high performing team, if you put the most talented people in a room or assign them to a project, if the human stuff isn't in a good place, you are headed for disaster.
That is so true. That is so amazingly true. I'm really curious if somebody's listening to this and they want to embed soft skills into their performance systems, but they don't know where to start. What would you recommend that they do first?
I think, first of all, and this is something we did this summer in our leadership retreat, is establishing a safe space amongst leaders, of which anybody's free. We, like you said, to say, give honest feedback. What are the roadblocks that are occurring in the organization that are not skills related? What are those things that are taking up your time to navigate, that if there were better soft skills in place amongst team members, that some of that noise could be greatly reduced. And so I think it's making a place for that conversation, a time for conversation. And plus, as an executive leading that conversation, you have to be ready to hear it, because you're not going to hear likely things that you want to hear, for the most part. So being very, very open to it. But then not, I think then the worst thing you can do as a leader is to invite that conversation, but then never take any additional action items from it. Don't put a plan in place, have further dialogue, whatever the case may be. There needs to be follow-up so that people do feel like they were genuinely seen and heard, and that you were actively listening.
Well, and that's sort of a soft skill development for you as a leader as
Mm-hmm.
well, like being able to listen and hear without defensiveness or without a negative reaction. And I feel like whenever I talk to someone who's in what they describe as a toxic situation, it typically comes down to the executive leader doesn't want to hear the
Right.
hard stuff.
Exactly. And
And
that's a skill I've had to develop over time. Not necessarily not wanting to hear, but sitting back and being an active listener. I'm a fixer by nature. So I have to just remind myself of, like, okay, Kelly, just be quiet. Let everybody talk, give everybody room. And also allow space for other leaders and individuals in the room to weigh in, to give their ideas, because I think too, when you are conducting the conversation, if you jump in right with your solves, with your fixes, it just kills the conversation. They're like, well, the leader has spoken, the conversation is over. So it's definitely something I've had to work on too over time.
there was a time in my career where I was leading a team that was having a lot of tension on the team. And honestly, the best thoughts around how we could fix that came from the most junior person on the
Mm-hmm.
team. She just had this level of emotional intelligence and this way of being able to sort of break down, this is what the situation is. I'm breaking it down into its component parts. Here's what the issues are from a bystander of the scenario. This would be my thoughts about how we could tackle it. And I was like, she should be a college president someday, because that's truly a gift to be able to do that. I mean, and that's something we should all be honing as leaders, as marketers, as people who work in higher education. I'm so excited by what you're doing, and I really hope people listening take something away from this. I want to kind of come to an end by asking if you could wave a magic wand and instantly elevate just one soft skill across everybody who works in higher ed marketing. What would it be and why?
Oh, that is a really good question. I would say, if I could wave my magic wand, I think a soft skill I would reinforce would definitely be curiosity, really genuine, fearless curiosity. Um, you know, in higher education, for various reasons, we can be really risk adverse. And a lot of times our resources force us to somewhat take the easy path. And there's times we all have to do it right. Well, it might be like stock photos, the same messaging on repeat. But if you take time to be curious, you do develop a level of higher emotional intelligence of, why does this message resonate or why doesn't it? Is there a better way? And really dig into what are people feeling? What are they seeing? How do they feel about your institution? What really makes your institution different? Be curious of why students chose another institution instead of your institution. I think those can be very insightful, probably a little uncomfortable conversations. But I think there is a lot of power in just genuine curiosity when you approach it, like I said, when you are fearless, when you're audacious, and you just want to seek to learn. I think you can gain, as a marketer, a lot of insights out of that.
I love that so much. I think curiosity requires a certain level of humility.
Oh, for sure.
Because you're like, I don't have all the answers. I need to be curious about other perspectives. I need to be curious about other things, a certain level of intellectual curiosity where you're challenging those sort of deep held beliefs that you've had. I just started a class through Harvard, and they were the very first lesson was talking about Blockbuster not responding to Netflix. And we had to write sort of an essay about that. And it ties into this conversation about curiosity because I felt like my response was sort of like they weren't curious about what the pain points were about what their audience, what would make their product better for their audience. And I think
100%.
higher ed is kind of in that same boat. What would make the recruitment process better for the end user? What would make it better to be a student here? Like, what are your pain points and how can we address them? So let's not become Blockbuster.
Yeah. I do not want to become Blockbuster whatsoever. That's awful.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. And the higher education landscape it's over the next decade, it's going to get more competitive. The competitive set is going to be a lot more diverse, and those who are not curious may have a Blockbuster fate.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And I worry about the Netflixes of the world, those disruptors that are just waiting in the wings to swoop in and offer something that addresses those pain points for our students. Arguably, Netflix wasn't a better product. You had to wait to get your video. It was a whole thing, right? But it was addressing pain points. And so what is going to be the thing that swoops in and does that? And I think we just have to maintain our curiosity about what's happening in the world and what's happening with people and what their needs are in order to not become a Blockbuster. And now Netflix has its own challenges, like that there'll be another disruptor that comes along. But we always have to be kind of on our feet and not just think higher ed needs to stay the way it always has been. We need to recruit the way we always have, that kind of thing.
I agree 100%.
This has been such a fantastic conversation. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Sure. Definitely visit me on LinkedIn, Kelly Hiller. I always love connecting. And I try to be really active on LinkedIn. And then, of course, khiller@purdue.edu. If there's ever anything, any questions I can answer or any information I can provide, I'd be happy to do that.
Awesome. I do have one final question. Why Purdue Brand Studio? I would love to know how that evolved. I think it's brilliant, but I would love to know how that evolved.
Sure. We just arrived at a place of which, talking about being disruptors, we pride ourselves on doing some disruptive things and wanted to kind of break out of what might be perceived as a little bit of the boundaries or constraints of being a department, because we really saw ourselves as an in-house agency. We were, entering our work in outside higher education spaces amongst other agencies, and just felt like that positioning gave us a little bit of a competitive advantage in those spaces and helped us stand out. But really, it is rooted in that we function as an in-house agency. We are the protectors, promoters of the Purdue brand, and felt like a branding was worth it.
I absolutely love it. Listeners, please track down Kelly, follow Kelly. Purdue is doing amazing things. Watching their marketing was real rough when I was at Miami, I'm going to be honest, because they were a competitor. No longer a competitor, so I can say they're doing a fantastic job. And as always, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, JaimeHunt. You can find me also on my website, solvehighered.com. And you can find my book at book.com. And it actually ends with a lot of exercises for leaders on honing their empathy skills and all of that. So it might be a good option for you folks that are looking to grow as leaders in that way. And until then, let's go bust some silos. Thanks for listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and contact drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.